Welcome to our Aya at 10 Roundtable conversation. My name is Allison Mondell. I am so thrilled to introduce you to our guests. We have a really beautiful conversation ahead, and I'm really looking forward to this. And I hope wherever you are watching at home, you will join us for this conversation as well. We want to hear from you, so please leave us a message in the chat, and we hope to get to all of your questions. But let me start by introducing you all to our guests. We have, well, I would call you all rock stars, medieval music specialists, as well as really women of great breadth in their careers that really have, in my opinion, exemplified the Renaissance woman, the modern Renaissance woman, who really find their knowledge and expertise and wisdom and vision really spans outside of, the field of medieval music, to really see all of you explore your own interests and follow your own pathways. It's really inspiring to me, and I'm sure to a lot of our guests. So we have, of course, Kristen and Crossley, the Aya cohort here.
Hi, hello.
Many times. But we also have Susan Hellauer. Hello, Susan. Thank you so much for being here. Susan, as I suspect many of our audience members know, was a founding member of Anonymous 4 and a musicologist, teacher, performer, and if I may say, just a wonderfully interesting, lovely human being. So we also have Michele Kennedy. Hello, Michele.
Hi.
Hi, it's so great to have you here. I truly admire Michele's work. She is, I would say, if I'm doing these introductions, so of course they're subjective, but I see Michele's work in as a soloist and as an ensemble member as just at the height of professionalism and beauty. So much loveliness that you bring to the music making and to your vision too. And I hope we get to talk more about your connection with girls' education and especially seeing how we blend the contemporary with the ancient, which is always something really interesting. I just love. And we have Angela Mariani. Hello, Angela, who I don't think is in Texas right now. She is in Massachusetts.
I am.
Yeah. But the University of North Texas?
Yes. No, it's actually Texas Tech University.
Excuse my.
No problem. They all have very similar names.
Yeah. Who has many hats and is a musicologist, performer. She's also the host of Harmonia Radio, which I believe is Indiana Public Radio.
It comes from Indiana Public Media, yes.
And syndicated throughout the world, I suspect. An early music radio show, and has recently published a book too, which I hope you'll tell us about in a little bit too. Yes. So everyone, these are very glib introductions, but I want to get right to our conversation. And I'd love to start by offering our audience a little bit of background about your particular entree into the field of medieval music, because that's why we're here. We have this wonderful thing in common. And I know we all have a bit of an origin story, if you will, but I would love to go, Susan, Michele, Angela, would you start us off and talk a little bit about what sparked your interest in this field?
Well, it was kind of an accident. I was a trumpet major in college at Queens College, and my specialty was contemporary music. I was the one who would always be writing, playing the music that was just written or willing to blow into other parts of the trumpet that were not normally accessed. And that was my thing. and I got Bell's palsy and I couldn't play. And at a conservatory-like place like that, you had to be in an ensemble. So they put me in the vocal ensemble with Paul Maynard, who was the one and only, is the only way to, describe him. He was a director of Pro Musica for a while after Noah Greenberg had died, and just the Renaissance man. And I didn't sing because singing was for sissies if you're a brass player. But there I was, I had to do my best. And of course, I think it was Dufay or Machaut was the first semester. And I said, what is this stuff? I have no idea. I just fell head over heels immediately. It was just an accident. And it's a circuitous path after that. But suffice it to say, that's where it started I guess I must have been a senior. And then in college, and then I changed my plans and went for a musicology degree, master's degree at Queens College, and then continued at Columbia. So I just fell madly in love with the sound of medieval music. I'd never really been exposed to it except very briefly in, music history class. And that was that. So yes, I'm a converted brass player, but I still have my trumpet. I still have my trumpet. It's under the bed. Yes.
How about you, Michele?
I would say that there are two early performance experiences that cemented the sound of medieval music in my mind and memory. The first of them was at Grace Cathedral in San Francisco. I was pretty little, and Chanticleer was performing a wide-ranging program, but what stood out to me was the Peroten. Hearing Viderunt Omnes in that kind of space where it's meant to illuminate the scaffolding and the light. I didn't understand it like that, of course, when I was a girl, but I was just so bowled over by the breadth of the sound in that kind of acoustic. And I think that's when I really started listening. I think I was 6 or 7. And the second formative experience was with women's voices. It was the first time I heard the San Francisco Girls Chorus, but before I joined it. And I think it was the spark that inspired me to join a few years later. They sang a program that centered Hildegard chants, which I know are near and dear to all of us here. And I had never heard women's voices singing chant, and I had never heard chant that felt at once kind of spare and also virtuosic. And I just loved it. I loved it. I also couldn't believe that they had so many Hildegard chants memorized. And I said to my parents, that's like a miracle. I want to learn how to do that. And a few years later, I joined the girls' chorus, and I really think it was the Hildegard chants that did it.
Thanks, Michele. Angela, would you fill us in?
Yeah, I kind of went backwards in time, I suppose. I was a rock musician, and my first instrument was piano. Then I played the guitar, and I was really interested in a lot of different, when I look back on it now, I realize that I probably just had a strong predilection for modal music, but I was very interested in a lot of these folk rock bands like Steel Ice Band and Fairport Convention and Pentangle and all of this. And of course, they did these rocked out versions of early ballads, which really fascinated me. And I thought, well, I'd really like to, one of these days, I'm going to really start investigating that older stuff. Then I got into college at UMass, and I got into the Collegium Musicum. And I don't even know if it was the 5 college then or was just UMass. I can't remember. But the very first thing that we did was do Phi Mass. And I just went, that was amazing. And it was kind of an interesting thing because Amherst early music hadn't started yet. A lot of these things hadn't started yet, but I was very interested in that. I was a theory major, theory comp major, couldn't really get my, some of my professors were, kind of not super interested in me running off and joining a bunch of early music, getting on the early music bandwagon. But anyway, I kind of went back into the rock and roll world for many years, and I was in a folk rock band that was did this kind of Fairport convention-y stuff. But I kept being drawn back to the early music. And finally, I mean, this is a 10-year story, so I'm trying to truncate it into 7 paragraphs. And then I ended up going to Indiana University. Ironically, it was because my husband, Chris Smith, was advised that that would be a great place for him to study jazz. So I trekked out there with him to look at it. Diehard New Englander here. And I noticed that there was an early music institute there, which I actually didn't know. And it had been there for a few years. And so I ended up going there as well. And I already loved medieval music, what I had heard of it. But I have to tell you that, the critical moment, these moments that go by you in your lives and, 20 years later, you look and say, wow, the critical moment is when Tom Binkley walked in the door and shook my hand and said, hi, I'm Tom Binkley. Because really, that he was a very, very, very important figure in helping me really make that commitment. This is what I want to do, this medieval music. And later, I also studied with Barbara Thornton and Ben Bagby, and that was tremendously important to me and my musical development. So I was very, very fortunate. I had amazing teachers.
Yes. Mentors are truly, truly valuable. I think it seems like we all have these, as I call them, lightning bolt moments where we are struck with something in this sort of, the pathway is not yet set, but certainly the heart is opened and the pathway, curiosity's pathway takes us dancing down the road.
If I might just, I don't want to, hog the screen here, but to when you said that about lightning bolt moments, the real lightning bolt moment, I had kind of already decided to commit myself to this, but I saw a concert at Jordan Hall. Was it Jordan Hall? It was in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So it wasn't Jordan Hall, but it was a Saunders. Thank you. Sanders Theater. Yeah. And it was Sequencia. And I think they were joined by some people from the Boston Camerata, but they did a concert that absolutely blew my mind. And I remember sitting there in the last row, literally weeping because I said, this right here, this is what I want to do. And it was like as clear a lightning bolt as it could be, and that has stayed with me.
Amazing. It seems to me that there's a real impression that's made. We of course are hearing ensembles perform this music, but there's something about the music itself, the way it impresses itself upon us. I wonder, and I would like to hear your thoughts on this. How Michele, you mentioned hearing women and girls perform, and of course we're all hearing different mixed ensembles and the like perform these works. Is there something that you feel that really impressed you about Angela, for example, hearing Sequencia perform? Was there something specifically about the music? Was it Hildegard, or was it some other early music repertory that was being performed? Was it something specific to the music, or was it the voices?
I think for me, it was both. It was hearing the expansiveness of Hildegard's language in young women's voices. I was struck by two things. I was struck by the spareness of all of those beautiful open intervals, and I was struck by the virtuosity with which they were sung. And I really loved that combination, and I had never heard it before. I think also, to piggyback a little bit on what Angela said, that for me, there were more formative experiences in college in terms of exposure to medieval music, but also how it felt in my body, my visceral response to it, especially in community. I did my undergrad at Yale and also my graduate degree, and the whole time I sang at Christ Church in New Haven. It was my first church job. And during that time, we started singing Compline. And I had not really done any meditation in my life before then. But what I would say is that in a word, singing the prayers and the chants in Compline every week felt like meditation. And I had not experienced music as meditation before. And I think it was really transformative and has come to be kind of a bedrock of my career since. Not in a way that I understood then, but I think what I did understand was that there was something special about it. Singing, especially the Marian chants for Compline. I felt so transported. And I also loved the contrast between the combined voices, women and men singing them together, and then in particular the treble sound in singing Marian chants in a beautiful space, particularly at night after dark. It was so transporting, and I think for me a real bedrock of my love of women's music and how it can transform.
Susan, I wonder, in the early days of Anonymous 4, what drew you to the configuration of voices that you did?
Well, it was actually not the configuration was just a reading session that Johanna Rose and one of the original, the very brief but original member of Anonymous 4, Susan Genvik, the rehearsal schedule was just too much, like rehearsing constantly for no money. Just for love. But Johanna had done some sort of an early music, like a pre-electricity festival somewhere, like a Renaissance fair, or a event at a monastery somewhere upstate New York. And the director of music, whoever was directing it, I don't know, decided to have women, just what you were saying, Michele, have women sing some of the evening chants rather than have the male voices, just do this whole service in women's voices. And same thing, she just loved the sound, fell in love with it, and said, let's get together. And I sang in the same church choir with her, and then she knew Marcia Janensky from some place. Oh, we were all in Pomerium. 3 of us were in Pomerium. And so we just got together to read chant and polyphony. And I think they really invited me, not so much because they need a low voice, but because I knew where all the music was. I could find I had all the music. I was Professor Ernest Sanders' teaching assistant, at Columbia, and I had transcribed tons of music. So I just brought a lot of it, and I knew where the additions were. So we sang about half chant and about half polyphony, 13th century mostly. Yeah, 13th century English polyphony, I think I started with. And it was just a revelation that because the voice ranges are basically equal voices in 13th century polyphony, it just, as everybody here knows now, but I didn't know that. I mean, I guess I would have told you that if you asked me, but I didn't think about it. So I brought it, and it just worked. It just worked really well. It just happened to work in the voice ranges we had there, these people. And above all, we all wanted to be in a group without a conductor.
Mm-hmm.
I laugh at remembering how important that was. I don't want anybody waving their arms at me or telling me what to do or what to sing or how to sing it. So I think even in the reading session, the seeds of a democratic movement were sown, and that was extremely important. It's extremely important that to decide things corporately without a leader. I mean, you have roles. Everybody has a role to play, but without a musical director who's saying, sing it like this, sing it like this. And without that was extremely important. And to have everybody equally responsible for the product. I think that was just reading. And then we decided to, it was in the springtime. And then in the summer, we did a church service at the church where 2 of us were in the choir. because the choir was off. So we said, can we do the, so that was August 3rd, 1986. Yeah. And so that experience, I think, was the seed of it. And the repertoire sounds great in equal voices, roughly equal voices. We don't have a conductor. We don't have a leader. And everybody's responsible for the output. So it's a combination of sonic and self-direction that I think sealed the deal. And again, one of the early members left in less than a year because we were rehearsing a lot and no jobs, no money. But I had a computer job. I was a software engineer, and I worked every day from 8 to 2, and then I go to the library, and then I go to Anonymous 4. And every day was like that. And it was good that I had that job. I had dental insurance. I was very happy. I had a 401k, I had dental insurance. I loved my job. But if you ever watch the show The Office, that's where I spent half my time. And but the thing was, it was good that two of us did not do freelance music, because we did our thing to earn money, and then every musical impulse was turned on Anonymous 4. And that helped me especially because I did a lot of research, a lot of library time, a lot of corresponding with scholars, a lot of transcribing, making editions. And yet I was not, I mean, I produced the material, but I was in no way the leader. You know what I'm saying? I had my role, but the other roles were just as necessary to try to get us concerts, to try to get people to give us money, you know? So that's really, it was that idea of being a corporate democracy, not to say we never had our disagreement, musical disagreement, because we did all the time, but we voted, you know, and we obeyed the results of our votes. Yes, we did.
Imagine that.
Sometimes you didn't like it.
Right.
Sometimes I thought I knew better than everybody because I had found the music, but no, it's not true. It's
Oh
just,
my goodness.
so that was the impetus. And I came from being with another group where I was the high voice all the time with two men, and I was the high voice. We did a lot of entertainment. We're in a lot of wedding pictures. And then I went to Anonymous 4 where I was the low voice, and they're both fine.
I wonder, is there something, just sort of segueing a little bit into the music, is there a particular focus that you have, Susan, Angela, Michele, regarding the repertoire, and specifically repertoire either composed by women or specifically suited for women's voices? Angela, I know you have you work with a Scola too, and I'm curious to know, you know, Altramar was a mixed ensemble, I could say mixed ensemble, yes. But I'd love to know how you are exploring programming right now with regards to women's voices and female composers.
I'm sorry, the signal, I missed a little bit of the very last sentence.
Oh, just sort of looking at programming decisions.
Oh, right.
Surrounding either female performers or female composers.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's an interesting question because every school is different, but our collegium is not huge. It's consistent, but not huge. And of course, we have a lot of turnover every year. Mm-hmm. So to some degree, I'm not 100% certain who is going to be in the group until sometimes as much as a week into the semester, because we have additional recruits, and then some people say, oh, I'm too busy, they can't do it. So I have to say that as far as the collegium goes, a lot of our decisions, my decisions are made on the basis of the forces that we have. You know, and I think that's actually not that different than people face the same issues in the Middle Ages. You know? But you know, so I wish I could say that it's not sometimes it's not a terribly lofty thing. It's simply, who have I got, And if I have an abundance of women's voices, I'll get creative. Who do I have that can sing low? So I don't feel restricted, but I have to find something that can suit the group that I have. I guess as far as collegium goes, that's what I would say.
How about you, Michele? You look at a wide range of music written by women. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yes. Well, I'll give you an example that I think has become kind of like a rubric for ways that I like to program. This is with Trio Eos. We did a program that was based on Hildegard chants. That was kind of the bedrock of the program, and interwoven between the Hildegard chants were contemporary pieces written by living female composers, one by Shulamit Rem, Kate Soper, and Susan Botti. And I just love the juxtaposition of medieval idiom alongside contemporary for a lot of different reasons. For one reason related to what you were describing, Susan, about not just lack of direction, but what it means to breathe together without a director, without anyone waving their arms, but also without any set meter. I think it asks us to listen in a different way. And we have to breathe together more deliberately because we're not singing in 3/4 or 6/8. We don't have set rests. We have to internalize the text differently, and I would assert maybe more deeply as an ensemble. And I think that that's kind of a profound act of sisterhood on a lot of levels. The synchronization of the breath, but also the invitation to fully embody practice, right? What does it mean to be strong, smart women singing together and breathing together? It's a powerful thing. And what I particularly love about juxtaposing Hildegard, for example, or any medieval selection alongside a contemporary one is that it brings a diversity of voices to the table. It brings maybe commentary about current events or mission-based work or issues that we're all thinking about and responding to week, especially in a fever-pitch season like this one. I think we need the contemporary voices alongside the historic ones for context, for dialogue. And I also think that there's a lot of fascinating points of contrast and similarity that we can draw. So I especially like with Eos and also with a number of other ensembles that I sing with to juxtapose medieval voices alongside contemporary ones. I just find that to be fascinating. And I also, in my work on Baroque music, I'm doing something similar, which is to say juxtaposing Baroque selections with 20th and 21st century selections to spark dialogue, not only across the ages, but across genres. To your point, Angela, I think that there's so many points of resonance, whether it's rock music, medieval music, spirituals, art song, Handel arias. I think that it's exciting to contextualize medieval music in that way. But I would just underscore that the point Susan was emphasizing, that the autonomy, the self-direction is, I think, particularly for women, a mode of empowerment. And I also love talking about this in mentoring young women and adolescent women, because we get so much noise from the world about how we should look and how we shouldn't look and how we should hold ourselves and how we shouldn't hold ourselves and things we should never do. And I think for us just to stand together calmly in our bodies and breathe together and make clear that we have something to say is it's a potent thing. It's a beautiful thing.
I think if you also infuse that cocktail with the power of the music itself, if you think about, and one of the greatest delights that I take in programming too, is the layering of time periods. I think of us as modern women and whether or not we're working with contemporary composers to be able to actually use our contemporary lens to look backwards, but not just to look and hearken to the past, but to actually breathe vitality into a repertoire, into I think of Hildegard, I think of the women of Las Huelgas, I think of all the sisters who penned music or who embodied the music themselves, and how there's still it's a living process, even to sort of bring the old into the now. Susan, I wonder about your programming and the group's programming with regards to crossover. I'm curious, especially because, looking at, say, the discography of A4 and seeing all of that really sort of body of early English and French music, and then moving into, say, American music and making that shift. Could you talk to us a little bit about sort of branching out, as it were? And, this is certainly my perception, my subjective understanding of that. But how that felt for you as a group and what response you encountered as well.
Yeah, so I just want to go back and fill a tiny thing in that from what Angie and Michele were saying about the women's music in our group. We studiously avoided doing anything that could be female identified for years because we didn't want to get pigeonholed as a women's music group.
Wow.
So we knew when we got together that Hildegard and Las Huelgas would be a natural, but we refused to do them until we did other things so that people wouldn't get us pigeonholed. That like you have to have a niche in order to, especially then, but especially now, to have a personality, either as a corporate personality that shines forth in a world where people can just put so much stuff right out there in your face. We felt we needed a niche, but we did not want to over niche ourselves and be associated with women's music, either female composers or Las Huelgas. So we just said, we did all of them eventually, but not for we didn't get to Hildegard till about 7 or 8 years. And also Hildegard is really hard, as you're saying, singing together, breathing as one, and everything is the text. And every gesture has to be believed equally among all. It's not because nobody's telling you, okay, sing it like this, sing it like this. It's so painstaking because everybody has to agree that that's how it goes because it has to. Who knows if it really went that way, but you have to have that feeling of conviction. And we didn't think we were ready for Hildegard for years, just to sing.
Interesting.
We sang a lot of chant. So programming. From the beginning, we decided part of our niche personality to separate us from others was that our programs were going to be straight through without intermission, and they would be connected by some sort of dramatic or narrative thread, that there was a story and the arc to that story. And the music, we used readings for several years, though after a while we didn't do that anymore, but like poetry and readings. But we actually asked people not to applaud and there's usually an hour and 20 minutes, maybe hour 15, hour and a half, no more than that. That was at the outside, beginning, middle, end, out. And that it would not be, we were reacting to what we didn't like. We didn't like programs that were our favorite pieces. Now we're gonna a tour of medieval Europe. Say that just drove us crazy because we sang in those concerts. So that was, again, no conductor, and let's have a unified program that combines chant and polyphony, not the way they were originally, say, in a liturgical service, because even at Paris in Notre Dame in 1200, the polyphony would be the spice and the meat and potatoes was chant, right? So we're not going to do that, but we're also not going to treat the chant like it's, well, you have to sing those incipits and then you get to the really good stuff. So we made sure to work in a lot of plain chant. And that in turn honed our ensemble. Because there's not, so I just saw out of the corner of my eye singing in unison from Ensemble Scholastica. Hi. Unison singing is it nowhere to hide. And you have to all be the same mind. So unified programs, narrative thread, or liturgical sometimes, because liturgy is theater, a story of a saint's life or an event, threaded together and no intermission and straight through. And people thought this was insane and just, how did you think of that? I said, put together everything I don't like about early music concerts, and that's what we did. But we did have to, bless you, we did have to, we felt we had to avoid women's music entirely until we were more established. Although we had no idea we were going to get established because we were just having a good time, you know, we're just enjoying the sound, enjoying the process, and making a niche during that process. So with, you know, just by what we liked and didn't like, we were creating our personality, but it wasn't a conscious thing. It was just us. We didn't have a leader or a mentor or anybody. It was just putting it together. Then, so the first paying job we had was contemporary music. It was incidental music to a Greek tragedy at the Symphony Space. And it was a female composer, but I can't remember her name. I'm sorry, forgive me. But she wrote some music and we sang it and they gave us like $100. we were pretty impressed. So we were doing contemporary music from the beginning. And then Voices of Light in the early 90s, the Joan of Arc. So that's, you know, contemporary music. We always, I mean, my beginning of my musical roots were in contemporary music. So it's, you know, totally natural to look at that for me. And then Marcia Janensky has a degree, advanced degree in folklore and folk life from UPenn. Penn U? I can't remember which one comes first. I mean, expert. She did field work staying in people's houses in Arkansas and singing on their porch. So, you know, and I always thought, and I just was listening to the radio on NYC, and they did a show of shape notes, sacred harp singing, and maybe some ives. And I just thought we could do that. We could sound good at that. That sounds medieval. I thought it sounded medieval. And so I went to bed that night and I dreamed about American Angels. I just dreamed the title. So the next rehearsal, I said, I'd had this dream and Marcia was in charge. And finally, I'm not. So, yes, so that came from listening and hearing the sonic landscape of sacred harp songs and Charles Ives and hearing the medieval spare fifths and fourths. And so we said, why not? Let's try. And it's the only recording we had that actually went all the way to #1 on the Billboard chart. We had several at 2 and 3 for a long time, but that was #1 hit. Go figure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we had to try it. The hardest thing about moving into that repertory was how to be ourselves and not be a parody of the field recordings that we listened to. Because as if you couldn't tell, I'm from the Bronx. The North Bronx. And I have no relation to this stuff. So that was the hardest thing, was how to sing it, honor it, be ourselves, and not be a parody. We spent countless hours figuring that out. So much stuff that you all know who have music groups, how much time you spend figuring things out that have nothing to do with the sound that comes out of your mouth, you know. So that went well. And the recording company just said, can you do another one like that? I said, no, we don't want to do something just like that. And then Marcia knew Daryl Anger and the fiddle player, and Mike Marshall, the mandolin player, so we put a gospel program together, Gloryland. And, you know, we included contemporary music in Welcome Yule. We had a commission. Taverner John Taverner wrote a piece for us in the Chillingarians. And, you know, we've always been, we didn't turn to it. We were always branching out, because if it sounds good, it is good. Did Duke Ellington say that? You know, and if it sounds good in our voices. So yeah, we just try, you know, if it sounds good, we'll try it.
I wonder, you know, hearing your story about, you know, the big wait before waiting music for women's voices. I'd love to talk a little bit about opportunities for women now. We have a question from Shazlen. I'm sorry, Shazlen, if I just didn't pronounce your name correctly, who says, I would love to hear more about all of your experiences with getting new ensembles off the ground, putting on concerts. I'm undergraduate and facing this world soon. So I don't hear any ominous horns for you, Shazlen, but it's definitely, I think, an interesting question. And I would love to talk to Angela about this, actually, who's fostering students in this very thing. But I would love to point specifically to opportunities for young women and women in undergrad and how to put your boat in the water, as it were. Any thoughts, Angela?
Well, it's interesting. I think about this a lot, because getting an ensemble off the ground at the time that I was doing something like that is a completely different ballgame than getting an ensemble off the ground now. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, in the past 8 months, that there's yet another layer of all of this that's become difficult. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if we try to see the silver lining here, I think that getting an ensemble off the ground, I think that the necessity of becoming fluent with technology and realizing the power of the internet and how important it is in launching a new ensemble, I think that's something that isn't going to go away. Even if they came up with a vaccine tomorrow for COVID, I think that the potential for reaching people with something like the internet is something that you just have to accept, and you have to be good at it. We didn't have to, it doesn't exist, you know, so for us it didn't matter. So that's true in terms of, you know, social media and things like that. But the other thing that I would say, and I just want to throw this in real quick, on a local level, is that it's really important to understand your community. If you are in a certain city and you want to play live and a lot of this, it's really important to understand your community. And I've lived, you know, I've only lived for long stretches of time in 3 different places. I lived for a long time in the Boston area, Massachusetts. I lived for about a decade in Indiana, in Bloomington. And I've lived now for 20 years. Well, now I kind of go back and forth, but I lived for many years in Texas. And what makes people come hear you on a local level is utterly different in all 3 of those different places. And if you don't observe that, and you're not observant about that, and you know, you have the way that you want to do it. Well, the way you want to do it might not be what your community calls for. So I don't want to, you know, go on and on about that, but it's a really important thing. If you live in a community where the way people create community is that 90% of them are churchgoers, then you're going to reach people by playing in those situations. If you live in a place where people create communities in different ways, then you have to investigate that. So these are, I mean, that's just one example of many, but that I would say that. And of course, I mean, for me to say this about the internet to somebody younger than me, I'm preaching to the choir. So you already know that.
but it does highlight the fact that we are not really beholden to our local communities at this time. What does local even mean right now? I'm not, looking at attracting an audience in a house, in downtown Washington, D.C.
Right.
It's, I think, indeed an opportunity for someone that is looking to even find their community, to actually use the power of, the internet, to actually be able to not only meld their vision with others, but find the audience.
Yeah.
In some ways, I wonder, I would love to ask Crossley about this, because I know she's been working locally still, and I'm sort of segueing into what you just mentioned, Angela, regarding the time that we're in right now during this pandemic, and how all norms are out the window for presenting music. Cross, is there something, do you feel, because I know you're still actively working in churches and getting out there, do you feel connected with the local community right now?
In sort of a very insular way, yes. Most of my singing is church related right now. So speaking to what Angela was talking about, just knowing your audience and sort of creating concert experiences or whatever you're putting out there based on the people you're going to be interacting with, which for me has been almost exclusively religious, because I think that's really most of what can be open right now. I mean, I've done a couple of small concerts, like very limited numbers can attend, little choral things and little solo things. But even those had a lot of religious undertones. So for me, yes, absolutely, the programming has been sort of very much along that vein. Where I'm really able to do my own thing right now is right here online. And that's been a very interesting experience to be able to put out things that I'm choosing to do, or things that have been requested of me that I would never have done otherwise. That's been really exciting. So I would say the things that I'm doing live are sort of par for the course, and then the things I'm doing online are new and and exciting. Yeah, it's been an interesting time to sort of straddle both worlds, which I feel like a lot of my music friends who aren't singing regularly, like at a place like the Shrine that has continued to have masses, it's sort of been all one way or the other. So it's been interesting going back and forth for sure.
That's nice. I would love to look at a few of our questions from our audience. Maud asks, or she says, I love getting together with a few people to sing. I find we can learn the notes, but it's sometimes hard to figure out how to get beyond that. Small group with no director. What suggestions do you have for how to take things further, being more musical, finding the character and emotional feeling of the piece? Susan, I'm looking at you. Would you feel that, please?
Yeah, I'm just coaching some very talented students at Yale now on Zoom, which seems to work much better than I thought. And they're singing Hildegard pieces, and they're good singers, but we have to go strip the music away and get back down to the text, what you were just saying, Allison, and we actually recite the text to find where the energy line goes to. Unison music, as Ensemble Scholastica said, there's nothing like unison to get that process going. So I highly recommend unison singing, whether it's plain chant or rounds where you sing, you like have a nice round or summerizakumenen or whatever, to sing in unison and find the architecture of the lyrics, whether they're usually poetry, sometimes prose, and take more time with that to find where the energy line goes, where's the crest, where's the arc of the line. And you can have people who yell at you when you do that. I won't name any names, who would rather be singing over and over again. But the music won't develop what you're asking for. It won't develop into what it could be musically, emotionally, unless the lyric is the driver, is in the driver's seat, right? And that can seem boring to people who want to sing a lot. Not that you shouldn't sing, but you have to, you're conducting a chorus and you have just a half an hour to get this piece ready. So you just start singing. And there's nothing transmitted about the energy lines in the lyrics or about the architecture of the piece poetically. And all of that is just crucial, especially if you're singing plain chant, unison, especially if you're singing something with complex metaphors and images like Hildegard. That all has to be sorted out. And if you can sing the notes together and, basically in tune and basically together, and you have what you want to make out of this piece of communication across the centuries or across the minutes, whatever, then you can get somewhere with it. But I shouldn't do all or nothing. Singers tend not to like to do that work because they want to be singing. And you can even designate a leader for a piece and have them just sit with it quietly and look at it in terms of its architecture, its poetry, its metaphors and images, where the energy line of each line goes, where that arrow is shot to, all of that. And then some other piece, some other person can take that task on. And when you take the pieces apart and then put them together with your skills, your musical skills, I think it makes a tremendous difference. It's just, I got used to working like that, and I got spoiled with the time to be able to work like that with Anonymous 4. I didn't quit my computer job until 1994, until Anonymous 4 was making about the same amount of money. And then, of course, we didn't keep making that amount of money because the business changed so much. And different things had to be proportionally rearranged. Our career arced with the CD. We started with CDs and we were done when CDs were done. So I could talk, blah, blah, blah. But no matter what, we were lucky that we had the time to address individual pieces at this level. We never felt when standing up in a concert that somebody was going to get lost, that we were not going to make out of the piece what we intend, that every piece didn't have a personality, because it did, because we spent the time, and we were so fortunate to have that time. And now when people have some time and you can get together, do that work, that semiotic work, that work about the content of meaning in the piece and the imagery and the metaphors and all about it. You can devote that time and not kill the person who's telling you to make sure to bring that out.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with you, Susan. I would add and underscore that I think we have this gift of slowing down, and we've been forced to slow down really dramatically. And I think for all of us initially, March, April, May, as it was starting to sink in, the degree to which our world was changing and the degree to which we were being forced to slow down, there was a lot of shock and a lot of grief, and now we've had some time to sort of regroup and make our peace, such as it is, with this new reality and how much things are changing. So I think I have a couple of ideas in response both to Maud's question and to Chaslin's earlier question. I think that the gift of time that we have now can help us to zoom out and think about what's most meaningful, right? What's most essential: family, health, music, I think, for all of us here. And I would just recommend to Maud and people that you're making music with, that you think about what moves you most, especially in this moment, and that you select your repertoire and your text from that place, because it will mean that your heart is in the work from the beginning. And I also think that less can be more, that it's nice to, in this gift of slowing down, that we spend more time with something that deepens our connection to it and not feel so rushed. And that it's okay if that's just a simple thing, as long as the connection feels real and feels deep. I also wanted to say, in response to Chaslyn's comment about ensembles, and this, I have one example from the world as we knew it before, and one from our changing world. The world as we knew it before, this also relates to a few other things we've talked about so far. I did this collaboration last fall with San Francisco Early Music Society. It was two ensembles coming together, Tres Hermanicas and Aquila Ensemble. And there were lots of things that I loved about this collaboration, but one of them was that it kind of broadened, I think, our Western lens on what medieval music can be. And I do think that this is part of a larger conversation that's happening in the field now that is important, timely, some would say long overdue. I know, for example, Early Music America is talking a lot about broadening our notion of what early music is, what it includes, and who it includes. And this program was this fantastic celebration of Sephardic music alongside medieval cantigas, and it had a lot of Hanukkah music in it, and a very sensual celebration of food and womanhood and sisterhood and joy. Like, it was just great. And we were just dancing on stage, and we had a fantastic band, and it was really visceral. And I think to Angela's earlier point about community, that there was something powerful about bringing that kind of program to audiences in Berkeley and Oakland and San Francisco. At that time, it was turning from fall to winter like it is now. It was getting cold. People needed comfort. People needed joy. People needed dancing, as I think we do now. And the second example I wanted to give to Chaslyn's point, I think that it's good to have a clear mission. If you're going to start a new ensemble, have a clear mission. What do we want to do? How do we want to use our craft to serve? Like, what is it that we want to accomplish? And once you have that clear idea, I think it's good to bring in some versatility, especially some flexibility that can adapt to the circumstances we're living in now. So what is realistic? What can happen under these circumstances, right? So my current example of group that I am excited about, and I think is doing this well, this pivot, is an ensemble called Kaleidoscope. It's an octet. It's 8 of us who are largely early music specialists who also do a lot of contemporary music. It's also, the vast majority of us are specialists of color in the field, and our mission is principally artistic excellence, right? Like all of us, and alongside fostering dialogue about representation, diversity in the field, what that means, what it means to serve in that way. And I think that under these conditions, it's essential that we bring in current events and that we bring in different vantage points on the historic rep, on the existing canon as we know it. And I think it's especially important to honor that familiar body of work that we've all studied, right? That our notion of the progression from medieval through the Renaissance, to the classical, to the Baroque, to the contemporary, we've all been steeped in that education, and we need to honor it alongside these pressing questions that have come up, particularly in the last decade, about, well, whose voices are included in that version of the history and whose voices are rendered marginalized. And the last thing I'll say is, I'll share, this is so nerdy, but I feel in safe company. My favorite metaphor for medieval music, this goes back to the cathedral and the world of Perotin and Leonin, and this sort of architectural sense of the music, spatial conception, right? I think I certainly love the spaciousness of a lot of the medieval repertoire that we know and love. And, you know, in the Notre Dame school, it was written, in fact, to illuminate the architecture, right? And I love that there's this kind of vaunted center of the nave in a cathedral, much like a medieval manuscript page. We get, you know, the works of the Illuminati, the works of the scholars in the center. And then we get all of this color and interest in filigree on the side, whether that means gargoyles or, you know, shadows. On the medieval manuscript page, you often will get, you know, monkeys in the margins and commentary, social commentary on what's written in the center, whether it's text or music. And we'll get commentary about gender, commentary about class, a parody of the narrative. So we see those themes iterated architecturally as well as musically in parody masses. All, you know, the metaphor plays out in so many ways. But the reason I bring it up now is because I think it's also a metaphor for the ways that the field is changing, and the ways in which any ensemble that comes of age now, I think, needs to both reflect the existing canon, newer voices that historically have been marginalized or sort of kept in the shadows. What does that mean? How do we forge a dialogue between the marginalized voices and the centered voices and come up with a clear enough mission that we're like, well, this is what we're about. But also, we're adapting. We're bringing new voices to the table. We're trying out some cool digital stuff. We're singing in big open gardens because that's what's safe to do now, you know? So I think that's my central piece of advice about anyone launching from this point, coming out of school. Find a clarity vision for your artistic work, and then find a balance and find some flexibility.
Angela, did you want to add anything to that? I saw a nod earlier.
Well, the nod was probably just agreement.
Thank you, Michele. It is that magical time when we're going to say thank you to our audience, and I would like to personally thank our wonderful guests. You've been lovely, and it's really a deep honor and pleasure and privilege to spend time with all of you and to share your time and talents and insight and wisdom. And we're really grateful. I speak, of course, on behalf of Kristen and Crossley, but all of us, yes.
Well, thank you, Allison. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, good. I'm going to invite our audience to 2 more events that we have. Our last week of fall programming is next week. So on Tuesday at the same time, you're going to hear Kristen and Crossley and myself, and a few surprise guests will join us as well for a live Q&A, and we'll be there to talk about our upcoming program on Friday, November 20th, which is really the jewel in this fall season. It's our performance of Beguiled. And there's so many interesting aspects to this program. I invite you to go visit our website, ayaensemble.com, and read about it and get your ticket and join us for this virtual live event. I'm so excited. Thank you again to everyone. And have a wonderful day, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Good to see you.